Greetings from Indianapolis. David Bohnett is a tech and social media pioneer. He's also an ATO from the University of Southern California. Shortly after graduation, David was co-founder of Geocities, which was one of the first social media websites on the internet. Geocities quickly evolved, so much so that it was sold to Yahoo in 1999 for $3.5 billion. Today, David is a connected and successful philanthropist, doing today what he's always done, helping people connect with one another. I'm Wynn Smiley, and this is the ATO Show. David, thanks for joining us today. Your history as it relates certainly to the social media space, definitely a pioneer. I'm curious, knowing, and you probably get this question a whole lot, but knowing what you created and then watching the evolution, when you sit back and just look at the landscape today, what goes through your mind?
Well, Wynn, thank you for the opportunity to be on this podcast. I'm very proud to be an ATO, and I'm proud to have to remain and have remained active with the chapter at USC, with some involvement with national since my undergraduate days. Let me answer that question going all the way back to my time in undergraduate school, and I know we'll get into that further, but the opportunity that I felt as a freshman at USC and going through Rush and joining ATO carried through my undergraduate days at USC and carried through to the point where I did start this early social network company that you referred to called Geocities.com. So I wanted to tie it back to that sense of my early days at ATO as a freshman at USC, in that sense of having a commitment to the community. It was about giving people an opportunity to contribute and participate by creating their own presence on the web. And to me, that was a commitment to the early web community. And so that's why it's pretty easy to tie it back to my early days at USC. In terms of where it's gone since then, it's surprised me as much as anybody else, because in the early days, it was really about creating a presence where people could share their knowledge about subject matters. Anything. We created dozens and dozens of communities of interest about sports and finance and fashion and nutrition and health and everything you can think of. And people created millions of pages sharing their information and meeting others on various subjects. Fast forward that to today, where it's become much more of a self-referential medium. And I didn't foresee that back in the day. I think we've lost something along the way. And as I've learned in my personal and professional life, pendulum swings back and forth. And I think we might start to see, or we're starting to see, some platforms where people are getting away from a lot of the self-promotion activity and just starting to share their knowledge and information with others.
Right, sort of a waterlogged kind of feeling with the self-promotion and the influencers, although you're always going to see that, but perhaps people have gotten their fill of that, at least for a little while, and are looking for different information, or information that is actually potentially useful for folks.
I think that's right, Wynn, and I'm hopeful.
Yeah. And when you first started, what was the idea? What was the nexus of the light bulb going on, saying, "Hey, I think we really need this"? You mentioned community. Was that a catalyst, and that combined with your engineering knowledge, or what was the prompting to move you in the direction?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. At USC, I majored in both business and computer science, and I started my career developing financial information and management information systems for various corporations. as a systems consultant. Along the way, once you could connect a modem, I started to spend time on early online systems like AOL Online and Prodigy and CompuServe, and I saw within those systems people interacting with each other in very interesting ways, meeting people in different cities and different countries. And so I'd had a background in that through these various online services and even proprietary bulletin board systems at the time. So when I first read about the World Wide Web in the early 90s, when I thought, sort of naive, but I thought this could be like a global America Online. I mean, this could reach everybody. And so I thought, well, I'm already pretty experienced with these other online services. Let me see if I can take some of the features from these services that gives people the chance to connect and post, and let's see if I can create a way to organize that in a way that motivates people to share their background and knowledge on various subjects. So it was really from my own background in the days before the internet, if you can believe it, and studying these other online systems and then adapting that to what I thought the potential of what the web could be.
And then it just took on a life of its own. Did in the early years, did it grow quickly and take off?
It grew. It grew pretty steadily. It was an organic viral application where if someone created a web page, we gave them the ability to promote that page to their friends. And as they continued to promote that page, and people created their own page and got other people to promote. So it was organic right from the beginning and pretty much took off. It was hard for us to keep up. Remember, this was very early days, and there was no cloud. There weren't the plug and play services we have today. So we had to build a lot of it ourselves, but we were able to keep up pretty well, and it scaled to be something fairly significant at the time.
The other day I was talking with some young staff members, leadership consultants, and was absolutely dating myself, but remember when the end of the semester, you would see thousands of IBM punch cards floating all over campus because they had finished their stack, their project, and it turned into confetti. But just
love that.
Thinking about the painstaking nature of what they had to go through. I never did one punch card as an undergraduate. That wasn't my forte. But knowing people who had to go and check every comma and asterisk and every other keystroke in a punch card, I do remember the frustration and then the relief when those things were over. And it doesn't seem that long ago, but it certainly was. You mentioned community, and this is an ATO podcast, and we certainly are expert at community. So let's talk about your ATO experience and the community that you got there. I think that most people, and I'm actually hearing from parents right now of new undergraduate pledges or new members. We send out information to parents saying, hey, congratulations, your son has decided to join ATO, and here's what ATO is all about. And community is a part of that communication, and hearing back from parents talking about how their son loves it and the impact, the anecdotes that every fraternity member would know and hear routinely. What was your experience like in ATO as it relates to just how did you get engaged with the chapter, and then how did that impact you as an undergraduate?
When my involvement with the Greek system goes back, I think, quite a while before I entered USC. Both my parents went to Northwestern University, and my mother was in a sorority. She was a Kappa. My father was in a fraternity, and particularly on my mother's side, my mother stayed very involved with her sorority her entire life. And so I was exposed to both the fraternity and sorority concept really all the time I was growing up. And so it was almost foregone that I would at least take a look at the Greek system when I entered USC. And as a I started as a freshman, and then USC then and now does have a strong Greek system, and I went through Rush, and I decided to rush ATO because of all the qualities that ATO stands for. I felt very welcome. I felt that the chapter had a true commitment to its service mission. I felt that the chapter, the brothers I met as I was going through the pledge process, were both very excited to be part of USC and very excited to be part of ATO. I was looking for that. I was looking for that blend of feeling welcome. I was new to Southern California. I grew up in the Midwest, so I was new to Los Angeles. So there were a number of brothers in the chapter, many that were from Southern California. It made me feel very welcome as a transplant from Chicago. And it was mere blocks from the campus. So, and it was that sense of that ATO sense of, as we've talked about, community and community service, and being part of the Greek system that made it a natural for me to want to rush and join.
And so when you got in, so you'd heard your parents' stories, both of their experiences, both on the women's side and the men's side, and I'm sure that you met over, as growing up, some sorority sisters and fraternity brothers of your parents.
I did.
And so hearing those experiences, and my observation is kids with that are raised in that environment have expectations and know more about the Greek system, and then they actually go and join.
Right.
How was your experience different than what you thought it might be, and in what ways was it, oh yeah, this sounds exactly like what I thought it would be?
Well, I think, the one thing I think of is food, believe it or not, because, I as a freshman, you're kind of always hungry, and the chapter had a great cook, and so that's one thing that really sticks out that I didn't really experience growing up, nor would I have. So I thought, gee, it's great to have food and meals. And I'm not making light of it, because I think we all know, even with our families now, how important it is to come together over meals. And so, that really was, to answer your specific question, that's something that was new to me,
Right.
Being part of a fraternity. And I guess it was, sure, I was aware of some of my parents, that some of their friends that were part of their fraternity and sorority experience, but they weren't contemporaries of mine. And so, I did, the other thing was that brotherhood, the sense that you are part of something that is a brotherhood within the fraternity itself. And so, I saw my parents, but as I say, that's their parents. And
Right.
so I immediately felt like, oh, I'm connected to these guys, and that's part of the whole experience of obviously, of course.
Right. And so thinking through your time as an undergraduate, how did it shape you? You're a big philanthropist now and are involved in a lot of community activities and organizations. I'm guessing the chapter impacted you some way in that respect, but if true, interested in insight there, but other ways the chapter impacted you as you went from freshman to a graduate.
One of the main ways it impacted me was, when I was a freshman at USC, I mentioned I grew up in Chicago. I'd never been to Los Angeles. I'd never seen the school. So, in many ways, I was like, whoa, I'm not so much a fish out of water. It was just like, this is a new city, a new environment for me. I'm an 18-year-old kid coming from Chicago. So just that ability to have a built-in, especially with your pledge brothers, a built-in social network right off the bat was really helpful. I was active outside the fraternity system at USC, of course, with my classes and others. But, for me, let's not discount how important it was that especially with my pledge class, that, I had a set of friends right away. So that's its own sense of community right there. And then the fact that you're with your older chapter brothers that were still in school all the way through seniors, and then our chapter, like most chapters now, also had an active alumni involvement. You immediately had that sense as like, wow, there's a there's a whole continuum of individuals involved that have stayed involved, but also, you're close with your pledge class. You're talking about the early time. You're close with your pledge class, but then the house is also filled with, other chapter members who are all the way up to seniors. So that's a really good environment to grow up in, to get involved in as a freshman, because there are people older than you that have already gone through what you're going through as a new member, as a freshman.
Right, and I think that even today, I mean, the basic components of sort of a fraternity environment, a fraternity culture, are almost identical to what you described, right? So coming in not knowing anybody on campus necessarily, whether the campus is an hour away or across the country, you're still in a new place. You had a new culture. Was it a culture shock to be around a lot of kids from the West Coast?
Was more of a culture shock to be in an urban university.
Sure.
So actually what was less of a culture shock was to be in a smaller group, which is where I grew up with in suburban, Chicago in the Midwest, within an urban environment. So it was, it really helped bridge that culture shock of being in a new city and a new state.
Yeah, today I think that college men, well, we've read a whole lot about sort of the loneliness epidemic of this particular generation, and especially for boys growing up, that seems to be a particular issue that's getting more media attention, and that translates into loneliness on college campuses for Generation Z in general, more so than any other generation. But then again, I think attention is being paid a little bit more to college men, and the fact that it's a bigger problem for men, and fraternity is an obvious way to very much combat that, I'm sure.
Well, let's excuse me for interrupting, but let's carry that all the way back to your first question about the social networks.
Yeah.
Because this is really one of the main values of fraternities in this era that you described at the very beginning, which is, and what you're describing right now, is this sense of isolation that the social networks in particular have created. So a fraternity is the best antidote for that. And again, it ties back this whole conversation about how do you combat that isolation that young men feel, particularly due to social media. You do that through joining groups like fraternities. So important.
Right, and it's interesting because the likelihood of knowing how to join organizations is much less with today's generation than it was in previous generations, because there's less interaction. It's like a vicious cycle, right? So you don't have as much interpersonal interaction growing up. So therefore, how do you join something? How do you say, I want to be a part of that? How do you approach somebody? And so it makes it even more valuable as it relates to fraternity membership.
Right.
So you graduated. We talked about sort of the early part and the very quick success of Geocities. Sold that, and then what? You obviously now you're a philanthropist. Did you feel like once you sold Geocities that it was like, let's try something else, or where was your thinking once you were able to sell Geocities?
I did two things, Win, which I continue to do to this day. Right from the time that Geocities was sold, I started to help mentor and also invest in other very early stage tech startups. because that had been my own background. It's what I've done since the sale. I have a fund, an early stage tech fund, and I invest in tech startups, and I help mentor young entrepreneurs and help them grow their business. So that's advice on hiring and market fit and competition and raising money. So I've done that ever since, and also set up then a nonprofit philanthropic foundation to give back to my community. And that's really something that ties way back, to my days at USC and being an ATO. So I'm fortunate to be able to contribute to causes that are important to me, like anti-gun violence, for example, and sustainable mass transportation initiatives, voter registration, under this whole umbrella of social justice, social service. And when you think of the organizations that I fund around social service, helping the underserved, that also ties very, very well back to my early days in the fraternity.
Yeah, and how do you think tech has impacted some of those areas, some of those philanthropy areas, those social service areas that you were talking about? What's been the impact of tech and social media?
Well, I think in a way, tech has made it easier for some of these organizations to reach a broader audience, but it's a double-edged sword, because it's easier for people to find the services they need, and once more people find the services they need, the greater the responsibility is and the greater the need is to raise money to fulfill those services. So you
Right.
find tech as a way for both clients and find the services they need now easier. And it gives these organizations a way to have a broader reach for fundraising. There's a whole bunch of societal issues on why the need is still so great. That's really beyond the scope of what I'm focused on. I'm really focused on helping organizations meet the need that they're trying to fulfill.
Yeah, and do you think so? Let's take Twitter as an example, X now, that everybody has a platform, right? And are not face to face when they offer their opinion as it relates to whatever the issue is, right? Political or not,
Right.
it can very quickly generate controversy because people can feel free to type whatever they want to, pretty much. And so when you look at that and things like social justice, because of course, folks that are promoting issues that relate to social justice also have a platform
Sure.
to communicate. Do you think that it's a net positive as it relates to the ability, and not just on Twitter, but social media in general? Do you think it's a net positive to move society forward? It's a pretty heavy question, but I'm guessing you've thought about this a little bit. A net positive as it relates to everyone having a platform and being able to communicate?
Well, we could start a whole other
Right.
whole other discussion about this, but a short answer is I've always felt it's a net positive to give people a forum to express their viewpoints, which is why I started Geocities. So I remain that it's a net positive. At the same time, from the early days of Geocities, I have been a supporter of responsible government regulation around hate speech and everything else. So I think government is playing more and has an important role in this media environment, just like government regulates other media environments. So I've been a big proponent of that. Where I tend, in the area that you're specifically talking about, where I tend to pay attention is, let's take voter registration and voter education. We provide support for any number of organizations to promote on campus and otherwise voter education and voter registration, independent of party. So yes, these platforms provide people to give their point of view, but my focus is let's get people to vote. And sure, I care who you vote for, but I even more care that you vote. And so, that's sort of where I bridge the area that you're talking about, which is Great. Everybody's talking. Terrific. Now vote or register to vote, or here's how you learn about the issues.
Right. So it's an easy education platform and a reminder platform to prompt people to take action,
Right.
to
Right.
vote. Yeah, that's great. So working with and just knowing the landscape, what are you seeing out there as it relates to technology? And everybody's talking about artificial intelligence now. I just read an article about Google's ability, the AI, to create a web a podcast with
Sure.
right, just by scanning in information. And I tried it by scanning. It was a little frightening how amazing. I mean, it was
Right.
amazing. It wasn't just regurgitating what was on the page. I mean, they had a host, they had a guest, and
I know.
they were bantering back and forth about what the information that I had loaded in on the page. But I guess what are you seeing as it relates to technology?
Well, good for you, Win, for taking that step and experimenting with it and trying it yourself. Because that's my answer to people, which is the same answer I had, in the early 90s when we would have this same conversation about the internet. And I would say, the important thing is just to get your feet wet.
Yeah.
If we're talking about AI right now, which I think is extremely significant, my advice is to do exactly what you did, is to educate yourself. Start with ChatGPT or start wherever you want. Start with Google, start wherever you want, and just start to play with it. Just what I used to say about email, just, get online, browse a few websites, see what it feels like. And the people that did that, they weren't so afraid of technology going forward. They're the ones that, there's this old saying: if you want to learn something, you teach somebody else. And so, I'm pretty hopeful. I mean, I'm a big user of AI, and I think it's an important wave coming forward. Whether it's as important as people think is yet to be seen. But the important thing is to do exactly what you did, which is, let me try this out, and let me start to think in the front of my mind and the back of my mind how I might start to use this in the future, because it's here.
Oh yeah, we're ATO. We're big users of AI. I think that I think the first time that I asked for a basically a cliff note of a book that we wanted to share with undergraduates, and it spit that out, and then I said, yeah, create a 10-minute workshop, and right, it did that. And I'm like, wow, okay. So we're big AI fans.
That's right.
We're big AI fans here. We have undergraduates that listen to this and are always interested in hearing from ATO alumni. And so for men who are just joining the chapter and having gone through that experience and having lived life and looking back on that experience, what insights would you give men who are now just joining ATO as undergraduates to get the most out of their experience at this point in their life?
Just stay close to your friends. There's all sorts of different answers, but I think one is the friendships you're making now are super important, and just prioritize your friendships going forward. And certainly you're making some of your closest friendships now that you'll have for the rest of your life.
And then following, for those who will be graduating and moving into the professional world and their family life and on from their undergraduate experience, insights for them that you really didn't realize as an undergraduate, as a member of ATO, but then you're like, oh, I can leverage a lot of what I learned as an undergraduate in moving forward. Any insights there, or any how that impacted you?
Sure. I want to be very honest and practical about this, because for graduates, you're moving on in your career and in your life. It's time to focus on, career and relationships and perhaps building a family. But if you at least stay on the newsletter for the chapter, if you at least, stay on Facebook or whatever, I had an experience, I don't know, maybe more than 15 years ago, where I needed, an intern for a company that I was supporting, and I, found an ATO. I mean, I've hired lots of ATOs over the years, and so my advice for a newly, graduating senior is just kind of keep your contact and be available. Someone might reach out to you for a job or a job referral, or you might need to reach out to somebody else. And so at this point in your career, that's what's most beneficial.
Great. Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and maybe we can do this again some point in the future.
Well, Win, I've known of your leadership for so many years, and thank you very much for all you do for our organization. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, David.